The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Okay, we have results from Super Tuesday yesterday. All sorts of states voting on the Democratic side, on the Republican side. We will start on the Democratic side. The big question, of course, Louis, was, will Bernie Sanders be able to continue this chase of the Democratic presidential nomination, or does the math become difficult? As you can see, Hilary Clinton overwhelmingly destroying Bernie Sanders in Alabama, doing very well in Arkansas, losing to Sanders in Colorado, winning overwhelmingly in Georgia, barely eking out a victory here in Massachusetts. In Minnesota, Bernie Sanders did win, and quite handily. Also, Bernie Sanders winning in Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Texas. Big wins for Hillary Clinton. Vermont, we do have the numbers reversed there. Bernie Sanders, 86%, Hillary Clinton, 14%. A huge victory for Bernie Sanders in his home state with very few delegates. That is important to remember. And then a big win, basically a 2-1 margin for Hillary Clinton in Virginia. So to sum up, Hillary Clinton winning 7 states yesterday, Bernie Sanders winning 4 states. The key thing to remember, Louis, is we do have proportional allocation of delegates here. In Massachusetts, for example, Bernie Sanders with 49% of the vote, getting just barely half of the delegates. So let's consider that. What about delegates? How many delegates does each candidate have? Well, it really depends on who you ask and how you count them. Whether you count the super delegates that are mostly Democratic Party officials, mostly who have said that they will ultimately support Hillary Clinton. Let's look at CNN's current count. And if you look at that, based on the 2,383 delegates needed to win, Hillary Clinton currently, by CNN's total, 1,055 delegates. That puts her at 44% of what she needs in order to secure the nomination. Bernie Sanders, 418 delegates, puts him at 18% of what he needs. Now, you might notice that those numbers don't really coincide with what has actually happened in the electoral vote alone, or rather in the popular vote alone in these early primary states. And that, of course, Louis, is because of these party officials' super delegate status, who have mostly already said, hey, I'm voting for Hillary Clinton at the convention. Big controversy over this. Is it really democratic? Has it served its purpose, or has it actually backfired and created a way, as Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Democratic National Committee chairwoman, has said, of preventing activists from running against establishment candidates? A lot of people increasingly displeased with this.
As they should be. What's more democratic than just going with the popular vote, right? I think if that is true democracy in its purest form there.
So let's talk about some of the upcoming contests over the next couple weeks. On March 5th, over the weekend, Kansas, Louisiana, and Nebraska will vote. About 125 or so delegates available there. March 6th, Maine will have 30 delegates at stake. On March 8th, Mississippi and Michigan, with just under 200 delegates at stake. And then March 15th, a really big day, Florida, Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio. Any number of delegates, Louis, hundreds and hundreds of delegates available there. Many of these start to become winner-take-all states. Now, there's sort of disagreement among some about whether these are going to be good states for Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. Robert Reich, who has endorsed Bernie Sanders, says now we're getting to Bernie's states. Unfortunately, the polling data doesn't really seem to support that, although a lot of the polling data in these upcoming states is very, very old. I think we can say with certitude, Louis, that in 2 weeks, we will either be able to say it's basically over for Bernie, or Bernie has a shot. I don't think it's realistic to say Bernie will be in the lead or the clear front runner after March 15th, but it will be more of a question of, is he still in, or is he all but out mathematically?
Yeah, he's got a shot. I think we're going to have instances of Nevada happening again. So I think Bernie.
Nevada, Louis. Remember, Nevada.
Excuse me. I did it. I did the thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, I expect Bernie to do quite well in some of these states.
All right, so we'll continue to follow that. We'll try to get newer polling data to you as it becomes available. Let's talk now about the Republican side. Super Tuesday. Is Donald Trump going to win this thing? I actually started feeling one way about this yesterday, and this morning, after a more sober and nuanced analysis of the data, which I always like to do, my views have shifted back. So let's start with the results from yesterday. Alabama, Trump wins. Alaska, Cruz wins barely. Arkansas, Trump wins barely. Georgia, Trump wins. Massachusetts, Trump kills. I mean, Louis, we didn't talk to a single Trump voter yesterday. We couldn't find him. But clearly, half of Republicans, just under half of Republicans in Massachusetts, voting for Donald Trump. In Minnesota, Rubio won. That's the big headline. Marco Rubio finally winning a state. Hasn't won a single thing so far. He's given 5 victory speeches. Hasn't won a single thing until yesterday. Oklahoma, it was Ted Cruz. Tennessee was Trump. Texas was Cruz, as expected. At least he carried his home state. Not his home country, by the way. He's from Canada, but his home state in the United States. Vermont was a Trump state. And Virginia, Donald Trump eking out a victory. So let me sum it up for you. Trump wins 7 states on Super Tuesday. Cruz wins 3 states on Super Tuesday. And Rubio finally wins a state, the Minnesota caucus, bringing his total number of wins to 1 win. How about the delegates? What do the delegates look like? The Republicans need 1,237 delegates to secure the nomination. Now, here is where my views started changing about what is happening with Donald Trump. Because of the proportional allocation of delegates so far, Trump has 315 delegates. That gets him to 25% of where he needs to be to secure the nomination. Ted Cruz has 205 delegates, and that puts him at 17% to goal. And then Marco Rubio, with 106 delegates, is at 9% to goal. This is actually still relatively close, Louis, even though there has been this feeling that Donald Trump is the inevitable nominee. And he may be the nominee, depending on what happens at the convention, depending on how long this goes on. But Ted Cruz is winning states, so even when we get to the winner-take-all states, Cruz can still get victories, and he would get all of the delegates in those states. And when you look at the delegate totals, 17% to goal and 25% to goal, that's still a real race that's going on the Republican side.
Yeah, I mean, closer than Bernie and Hillary right now. So it's, I guess Cruz is not out. Kind of scary, but we'll see what happens.
All right, let's now talk about where we need to be thinking as progressives about the future of this Republican race. Later in the show, we'll talk to a number of both Democratic and Republican voters who have thoughts about this. We were out yesterday talking to voters all over the place. Let's first talk about the situation on the Republican side. I've been saying for a while that the non-Trump candidates, Louis, should, if they want to really knock Trump out before the convention, all but one should drop out and coalesce the non-Trump vote behind one candidate. Now, according to a recent CNN poll, Trump is polling 49% of Republicans nationally. That may change the numbers. But Ted Cruz yesterday, in his bizarre and creepy victory speech, called for all of those who haven't really won to get out. Now, prior to yesterday, that was both that included Marco Rubio. Yesterday, Marco Rubio did finally win the Minnesota caucus, but still it's not looking too good for him. And Cruz said, if we want to defeat Donald Trump, basically everybody but me should get out. I'm unsure that's going to happen. It's not clear to me that Marco Rubio is ready to do that. Kasich picked up some delegates yesterday. I don't know that he's going to do it. Ben Carson wants to keep selling books, so he'll stay in this thing as long as he can. But there's another interesting thing happening within the Republican primary, which is that Trump's rhetoric, which, let me remind you, is completely phony and fabricated to coalesce angry, low-information voters into supporting him. Trump's rhetoric is moving to the left. He repeated yesterday in his victory speech that Planned Parenthood has done good things for millions of women. This is not a position that other Republicans are willing to take. It's a totally accurate and logical position. Donald Trump talked about rebuilding roads and bridges. This is infrastructure spending. This is really the idea of the left, not of the right. And as we know, Donald Trump's voters, as he has said multiple times, will support him even if he shoots people in cold blood on Fifth Avenue. So there's not that much risk to Trump in terms of his current contingent to moving drastically to the left. The optics from abroad of Donald Trump winning would be very harmful and ridiculous. But there's no doubt in my mind that given the option between the delusional right-wing evangelical Ted Cruz, who believes, along with his wife and father, that he was anointed by God to run for and be president of the United States in order to bring about the second coming of Christ, and the guy who's sort of figured out what to say to get people to vote for him and has some left-wing ideas. I think if I knew it was going to be Trump or Cruz as president, there's no doubt I go with Trump, although the optics would be laughable. I mean, the U.S. would be a laughingstock.
Well, in a way, we already are. So
because he's gone this far.
Yes, that too. That doesn't help. And for me, I just think there is something to be said for shaking up the establishment, for changing things. And while Bernie Sanders is a guy who might do that through policy, and Trump is a guy who might do that through
comedy,
banter, either way, I'd rather have a non-establishment candidate in the White House. And also, Trump has said he supports national health care. I mean,
well, yeah, kind of. I mean, it's so hard to even understand. It's so hard to understand what his position is. But yeah, the criticism from Cruz is Trump is for repealing Obamacare and replacing it with something that is just as, quote, authoritarian as Cruz would put it. Trump is in so far over his head that at this point there may not be any way out. And should he become president, his supporters are going to be very angry when they find out he's not able to do any of the crazy stuff he wants to do. But in watching Ted Cruz yesterday, Ted Cruz suggested or promised that he would get rid of the IRS. I mean, how can anyone be taken seriously who says they will get rid of the IRS?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess you could institute another agency in its place that does the exact same thing and call it something different, but that's your only option.
With the exact same rules, yeah. I'd way rather, bottom line, everybody knows that I think the Trump candidacy is a total joke. I think that because of his good speaking skills and sort of ability to assess what will get angry voters to support him, he's done something that takes craftiness, for lack of a better term. But if I knew it had to be Trump or Cruz, I go with the obvious phony rather than the mentally ill lunatic. That's just me.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I think let's just, as I said yesterday, put the icing on the cake here and shake things up and have Donald Trump be president of the United States.
Louis is kidding, by the way, but I think what he's saying is if it had to be one of these Republicans that actually has a shot, because obviously it's Kasich, right? Kasich is really the guy we would go with if we just said, from the 5 people remaining, we get to choose whoever we want, although he recently did defund Planned Parenthood. I mean, on that issue, Trump is far to the left of Kasich, interestingly enough. Am I crazy? Have I gone crazy in thinking this? I'm on Twitter at dpacman, and Louis is on Twitter at louismotamedy. Let us know.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show is viewer-supported media. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Today's new member of the day is Andrew Brownlee. Andrew, thanks so much for signing up. And remember that this Friday we have a Super Tuesday-related membership discount. So if you've been thinking of signing up, go to davidpakman.com, get yourself on our mailing list, and you will be notified about that. We have voter interviews that we did yesterday, Super Tuesday, to get to, but before that, we need to get into Hatriot Mail. I'll remind you what that sounds like.
Hatriot Mail, your break from the tyranny of unbiased, independent media. Because knowledge and information are just communist conspiracies. Hatriot Mail, written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America, and because freedom.
Okay, so we've had a lot of conspiracy theories lately. We've had a lot of anti-Semitism. We've had a lot of moon landing was fake stuff. We're taking a break from that. Today, Hatriot Mail is going back to a tried and true topic of interest to Hatriots, the Confederate flag, and possibly the longest run-on sentence in Hatriot Mail history. Let's take a listen.
The Confederate flag is still a part of our history and our culture. And if you want to be inclusive, a left-wing f***ing communist anti-American motherfuckers like you always say you want to be inclusive, then what are you worried about the Confederate flag? For then should I worry about Black Lives Matter? They are racist. Oh, yes, they are. The Confederate flag is not a racist symbol. You know what's offensive is the vacillation that's coming out of your communist, loser, pedophile, or parasite mouse. Enough is enough already. You guys want to live like that? Go live in another country. I should buy we'll just have a civil war. I'm gonna take off. It'd be a pleasure to exterminate you left-wing motherfuckers, so shut the fuck up.
It's unusual, Louis, that when you have a sentence that could span almost an entire page of a children's book, that the word vacillation is used. That, I think, is the most notable piece of this.
It's kind of like one of those George Bush speeches where he would have this one big word that he likes to use, and he would use it for a few months at a time.
Right.
Then he'd find another big word that he would always use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's an idea. I don't think I have much else. Presented without comment, as I like to say. Okay, yesterday was Super Tuesday. We went out. We talked to voters. We talked to voters at polling places. We talked to voters all over the place. We went to a Bernie Sanders, the official Bernie Sanders Boston area event, and I have a bunch of stuff to present to you. First, I spoke to a few Hillary voters. I'm going to play this video for you. The interesting thing here was I was told in a completely serious manner by a Hillary supporter that she supports Hillary because of, and I quote here, Billary, which is an unusual reason to support a candidate. But that being said, let's take a look. Here with a Massachusetts voter, did you vote on the Democratic ballot or Republican today?
Democrat.
And who did you vote for?
Hillary.
What made you decide to vote for Hillary Clinton instead of Bernie Sanders?
Billary.
Billary. Explain that.
Well, I think Bill Clinton's one of the best presidents we've ever had, and I think somehow he'll have an influence. So
in a way, by voting for Hillary Clinton, you feel as though it's a way maybe to get Bill Clinton to have more influence in the U.S.
I'm sure he will.
Any particular issue that you really agree with Hillary Clinton on?
A lot of them. I really couldn't pinpoint one right now.
One that's most important, maybe?
Not really.
Not really. Anything you disagree with about Bernie Sanders' platform?
No.
So really, Bill Clinton was an important thing for you?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Definitely. All right, thank you.
You voted on the Democratic ballot today. Who ultimately received your vote today?
Hillary.
And what made you decide to vote for Hillary instead of Bernie Sanders?
I've been a Hillary supporter for a long time, since Bill, and I wanted her to, be the first female president, and I voted to her the previous election, but she never made it. Obama did instead, so this time again.
Is there any particular issue where you really agree with Hillary more than Bernie Sanders?
I think she's a little bit more knowledgeable in terms of defense and international affairs.
And are there any issues that are of particular concern where you don't feel Bernie Sanders is qualified?
I think Bernie, he has a lot of good ideas, but I don't know if they're realistic in terms of, becoming a reality.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Which ballot did you vote today, Democratic or Republican?
Democratic.
And who did you ultimately vote for?
Hillary Clinton.
Was there a long period of time that you thought about this, or was it clearly Hillary for you from the start?
Probably pretty clearly from the start.
Any particular issue where you said, Hillary Clinton, I agree with, Bernie Sanders, I don't?
Nothing particular. I think just more of the electability of Hillary. Some of the Bernie's policies I agree with, but I don't feel like he could be effective implementing them. So nothing specific.
And in what sense do you feel Hillary is more electable than Bernie Sanders? Or why do you think that, I guess, is what I'm saying?
Why do I think she's more electable? I think she has a more moderate position. Still very progressive, but more moderate. I think Bernie will be cast as someone who's too far to the left for a general election.
So obviously that doesn't seem to be totally backed up in the polls. What was your thought, Louis? I mean, whenever we talk to Hillary voters, now we've spoken to them in New Hampshire and we've spoken to them in Massachusetts, there is this sense that it's not so much about issues, but it's about the idea of Hillary Clinton as the nominee.
Yeah, or the idea that Bernie Sanders cannot successfully implement his ideas.
Right.
And I say, who cares? Let Bernie try. Let him move the discussion in one direction. But I guess people don't agree with me.
I think that certainly the Massachusetts Hillary voters we spoke to, not to generalize because we spoke to a handful of each, they seem to have slightly more rational ideas about voting for Hillary versus Bernie than those with whom we spoke in New Hampshire, although we've spoke to a very small samples of
Exactly.
both.
Yeah. I don't know if we spoke to enough people to actually determine anything, but still some of the same ideas throughout.
Yesterday, John Kasich on the Republican side did better in a few states than he has been doing. Vermont was one of those states. Here in Massachusetts was another state. And we spoke, Louis, to independents and even left-leaning independents who said, I'm voting strategically on the Republican ticket today, the Republican ballot, because if it's going to be a Republican who wins the White House, I would rather it be Kasich than one of these other lunatics. So let's play my interviews with a couple of strategic Kasich voters, as we're calling them. It is Super Tuesday in Massachusetts. Which ballot did you vote on today?
I voted on the Republican ballot today.
And who ultimately earned your support?
Kasich.
And why John Kasich?
Because I believe that there is a need for some rational conversation with some experience. And while I am normally a Democrat, I felt very strongly that the Republican ticket needed a little bit of adjustment.
Will you be voting for a Republican in November for sure?
Unlikely.
Interesting. So are you undeclared? In other words, are you associated?
I'm a declared voter, so I get to vote whichever side, at this stage, whichever side I want. But it is unlikely that I will vote as a Republican.
Was this a sort of safety with the idea that if it is ultimately going to be a Republican, you would rather it be a sane one?
Yes, exactly. If it's going to be a Republican, I would like to have some sane discourse because I don't feel the current discourse is particularly reasonable.
All right, let's start with the simplest question. Which ballot did you vote in today?
I am unenrolled, so I voted on the Republican ballot.
What made you decide to vote in that ballot today?
I wanted to vote against Trump.
What about Trump are you most displeased by that turns you off of Trump?
I think he's too volatile. I cannot imagine this person leading our country and sitting and conversing with other world leaders.
Who ultimately earned your vote?
I voted for Kasich.
Kasich, all right. And any particular issue that attracts you to Kasich?
Not particular issue. I mean, generally, I lean more to the left. So I just think he seems the most moderate out of the other candidates that are running in the Republican primary.
And do you plan to vote for a Republican in November, or is that not a guarantee?
No, I'm definitely voting Democrat in November.
Really? So we've talked to so you're a strategic Republican primary voter. The idea being if it's going to be a Republican, you'd rather it be Kasich than Trump.
Exactly.
Did you vote in Democratic or Republican ballot?
I voted in the Republican ballot today.
Are you a lifelong Republican?
Converted Democratic person to Republican.
And who ultimately earned your support today?
John Kasich did.
And we've been hearing that from a lot of Republicans here. Why Kasich?
I'm kind of fed up with the other guys. I feel like they're not standing for what America does, and I feel like John Kasich does.
You're fed up with the other Republicans?
Republicans. Rubio, Trump, and Cruz.
Are you getting worried that as Donald Trump continues to get more and more support, the other four guys should maybe say, 3 of us should drop out so we can all get behind someone other than Trump?
That wouldn't be a bad idea, actually.
And are there any that you would not support? In other words, if the 4 got together and said it's Carson or it's Rubio or it's Cruz, would you still support them over Trump?
Oh, that's a tough question. It'd have to depend. I would probably pick Rubio over the rest of them.
And ultimately, will you be voting whoever is for the Republican nominee in November?
That remains to be seen. Hopefully an independent will step in.
Any particular issue of importance to you that makes you vote on the Republican ballot?
I think financially our country could do a lot better than what we do right now.
And in what ways specifically? Or let me put it in what ways the country not doing well financially now?
I think that we spend a lot of money unnecessarily on government issues and welfare and stuff like that.
And which specific programs would you like to see cut if it were up to you?
Medicare, Medicaid, maybe not cut, just less funding, and welfare in general.
And
stamps.
If that was done, where would people over 65 get health care in your plan?
To be determined.
Right. To be determined. So interesting though, Louis, Trump killed it in Massachusetts, 49% of the vote, but the non-Trump Massachusetts contingent, very, very much against Trump.
Yeah, I wonder if all, after talking to all these people, if all the people who were independent and voted for Kasich just to try and keep Trump in check voted for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, lost by such a small margin in Massachusetts. Maybe he could have eked out a victory.
It's a very, very interesting question. Yeah, very, very interesting. Last thing I want to talk about from our interviews at a Boston polling place yesterday, I spoke to a guy that we're calling Chris Christie guy. This is a guy who, even though Chris Christie dropped out a week ago, or longer than that at this point, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe even, he voted for Chris Christie anyway yesterday. And ultimately, the topic turned to none other than Benghazi and emails and Benghazi. Take a listen to this. Are you enrolled as a Republican, or are you unaffiliated but chose to vote on the Republican ballot?
Enrolled a Republican. If I had a choice and if I had the time, I would have switched to independent.
All right. And what issues were most important today for you in deciding who to vote for?
Jobs and the economy. Our foreign policy is important to me. But most important to me when I always vote, I always look at the candidates who I feel I can make the biggest impact here with jobs and the economy.
And who did you feel that candidate was?
I felt like the best candidate for that was Governor Christie.
Okay, in spite of the fact that he has now endorsed Donald Trump, would you ultimately support Trump given that he is Christie's endorsee?
If it comes down to Trump or Hillary Clinton, I would vote for Trump.
And what about Hillary concerns you, or on what issues do you disagree with her?
Things that concern me is a lot that has to do with the whole Benghazi issue and the email part. I've kind of followed that. I think there's a bit of cover up there.
To put a final point on the Benghazi thing, 8 or 10 panels now investigating the Benghazi thing. Yeah. Nobody's found any wrongdoing. Do you think eventually wrongdoing will be found?
It's a good question.
Or how many panels would you like to see before you're willing to say this is a done deal?
Is it okay for me to feel like it was wrong? And I do understand that some politicians do set up their own like personal email accounts because of issues when they go overseas and travel. I do have an issue of her setting up her own server and having her own dedicated email address and communicating with people. I think that I'm not sure necessarily if she should have been communicating with people in that way.
Well, but the FBI is looking into that, and we'll see. There may be charges, right? But on the Benghazi thing,
I should ask you, what is your media affiliation? Which way do you guys lean? Left?
Free Speech TV has a variety of shows on. Yeah. So I was sort of dancing around. We cut that in a funny way, but afterwards we did tell them, obviously, we're a liberal show. So once I said, there's been 10 panels, how many do you need to determine that the Benghazi thing is no big deal? All of a sudden, the big concern is, are we liberal or conservative? Interesting, Louis. I mean, I don't know exactly what to make of that. Voted for Christie, even though Christie's out. And then the big concern is Benghazi and emails. But, everybody follows what's important to them, I guess, is the a non-judgmental takeaway here.
My mic is on now. Excuse me. There's a lot of buttons over here. I think it's safe to say that in general election, this guy will not be voting for Hilary Clinton. I think we can say that.
We can say that with a fair degree of certitude. Okay, we'll take a break. Join us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. After the break, our interviews with Bernie supporters. What do Bernie supporters in Massachusetts think about Hillary Clinton? Will they ultimately vote for her?
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
So after we went to the polls to interview voters on Super Tuesday, we went to the official Boston area Bernie Sanders results watch party. We spoke to a whole bunch of Bernie Sanders supporters. And the first question was, at this point, we didn't know exactly how many states Bernie would win on Super Tuesday. But the question was, can Bernie win? What do you think he needs to do on Super Tuesday in order to maintain a reasonable path to the nomination? Here's what people had to say. Okay, we're here at the Boston, Somerville, actually, Bernie watch party. Still trying to figure out, does Bernie have 2 states, 3, 4? Still trying to see where Massachusetts and Oklahoma play out. What would you like to see to really come away tonight feeling like this has legs and Bernie Sanders could take this all the way to the convention?
I'd really like to see a tie at the minimum. I think it's been a foregone conclusion for a while that Hillary really has the backing of the South, but those are really her only strongholds. Everywhere else, Bernie has already surpassed her, or he's like rising in the polls every single day. After Super Tuesday is done, if we hold on to Massachusetts, Oklahoma, and the more northern states, we're going to show that Bernie is a national candidate and Hillary is very much a regional one. That America as a whole supports Senator Sanders, and Hillary has a very limited fan base.
I would like to see Bernie take at least half the states to really feel like we won tonight.
Bernie Sanders has removed everybody's trepidation to the term democratic socialism. The fact that he is leading in these 4 states, or potentially leading in any state, is a miraculous triumph of will for any candidate. So the fact that he's doing this, yes, I do believe that the nation will see this and see the coronation of Secretary Clinton is not going to be carried out the way everyone thought it was going to happen.
I think 3, hopefully 4.
I'm hoping that he gets 5. 5 for me is like, it's good. We got this with 5. I'm thinking it's gonna be somewhere between 3 and 4. If he gets 4, it's gonna be a good day. 5 again is perfect. 4 is great. 3 is good. 3 is good. Anything less than 3.
You've got some real questions if it's under 3.
Oh no, I still have no questions.
Not about him, but just about the prospects.
Yeah, the prospects about how the media is gonna spin this.
So, optimistic crowd, Louis, right? I mean, a friendly crowd to Bernie. It was all Bernie voters, optimistic. Ultimately, Bernie coming away with 4 of those states. What do you think? I mean, you think the crowd we spoke to yesterday, and we spoke to more people than the number we included there, something to be happy about? What do you think?
Yeah, I guess so. It's amazing that he is even considered a contender at all, considering his platform and how he described himself, right?
Yeah, no, there's definitely been a shift in terms of the perceptions of the ideas of Bernie Sanders and democratic socialism. No doubt about that. Very, very excited crowd at the Bernie party. Okay, the next question I had for Bernie voters at the official Boston Bernie Sanders campaign watch party was, what do you think about Hillary Clinton? And really try to figure out, is it that you like Bernie a lot more, or is it that you have an active dislike for Hillary Clinton? Let's see what people said. If ultimately Bernie Sanders is not the nominee, what are your feelings about Hillary Clinton as the potential Democratic candidate?
I think Hillary Clinton absolutely has her flaws. I am ecstatic at the idea of a female president finally in the United States. I definitely think that she is the lesser of 2 or 3 or 4 evils compared to a lot of the Republican candidates.
I don't like Hillary Clinton. I don't think she's trustworthy. I just don't think she's real or authentic in any way.
For me, at first, before Bernie Sanders was in this race, Hillary Clinton was my choice. But for me, Hillary Clinton has had ties too close to Wall Street. Her vote in Iraq was a very big blemish on her career, as well as not saying anything to do with the Trans-Pacific the TPP, the trade deal, up until it was politically viable for her to be opposed to it.
I used to be a big supporter of Hillary, and then I did my research, and I don't feel like she's to be trusted.
There's just so much about her that just really irks me. From her constant flip-flopping to a massive support for Wall Street, corporate America. She was for the TPP. Now she's saying she's against the TPP because she's running. She was a moderate in 2008. She got beat by Barack Obama, and now she's a progressive because Bernie Sanders is doing great as a progressive.
I'm hesitant, but I'm willing to support that, and hopefully some of the similar ideas that she has can still be brought to the White House and still perform well.
The thing with Hillary is that she's much more of your typical politician.
So it was really a mix, right, Louis? I mean, we talked to people who really seemed to have an active dislike for Hillary Clinton. Then we talked to people who said, yeah, Bernie Sanders is more progressive in my estimation, but Hillary Clinton is not a bad person, and she's a good alternative if it's not Bernie.
But the theme of Hillary being untrustworthy and kind of fake, yes, that too is that was very popular among the Bernie watchers. So I guess that's not really surprising. That's the best criticism there is, in my opinion.
Last couple of clips from speaking to Bernie supporters at the official Boston Bernie Sanders watch party yesterday. Will you vote for Hillary Clinton if Bernie Sanders is not the ultimate nominee? Sort of an important question. Let's see what people had to say. If she is the eventual nominee, would you support her over the eventual Republican nominee?
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
Potentially.
I would vote for her in a heartbeat over Donald Trump or Ted Cruz.
Not at this moment. I don't think I could.
Well, since I live in Massachusetts, I'm kind of privileged enough to not have to vote for her. So with that being said, I'm not voting for her.
All right. So Louis, a mix. I think if it was election day and the options were Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton, how many of these Bernie supporters are really going to show up and cast a ballot for Ted Cruz? I think very, very few.
Or you could just abstain, right, in protest. Of course, depending on the state you live in. I would imagine that if it's going to be a close race in your state, you're probably right.
And last thing, here was kind of a funny moment trying to ask the same question to another Bernie supporter, and things just started getting a little crazy at this watch party.
Well, I don't think Hillary's bad at all. I'm just like a
Sorry. We're getting some results here, and it looks like Bernie's lead in Massachusetts has evaporated, actually, and they are now tied in Massachusetts, incredibly. But he is up in Oklahoma at this point, which is incredible. Wow. Wow, Louis, wow.
live stuff happening here.
So a very, very exciting evening, Louis. I know you were, Louis, we get there and Louis says, is there a bar here? Because I think I need a beer if we're going to stay here for a while. And you did find that beer, didn't you?
I got a beer. I was able to bring it back to the watch party.
Yeah.
And people were looking at my beer. They didn't know you could bring beer in. I said, yes, bring a beer in.
And then within seconds, the room was full of alcohol. I mean, just a stunning, stunning display, Louis, of shepherding people over to the bar and back. Even if not physically, ideologically, you open the idea of getting beers and bringing them over. So that was our discussion yesterday with Bernie supporters. Make of it what you will. We'll continue talking to voters as this process continues.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Exciting news from the world of extremism. Nation of Islam leader and known anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan has added himself to the list of racists supporting Donald Trump's candidacy for president. He praised Donald Trump during a sermon earlier this month, or late February, I guess it is at this point, saying that Donald Trump is the only one of the current candidates who is not being controlled by the Jews. According to the Anti-Defamation League, Farrakhan told parishioners of Chicago's Mosque Mariam Sunday that Trump, quote, is the only member who has stood in front of Jewish communities and said, I don't want your money. Going on to say, anytime a man can say that to those who control the politics of America, I don't want your money, that means you can't control me. As you know, Louis, I know you're a big student of Louis Farrakhan in the critical sense. Farrakhan has a long history of anti-Semitic comments. He said Jews were behind 9/11. He said that God was the one who put Jews in the oven, referring, of course, to the Holocaust. His praise of Trump is interesting in its timing because former Klansman David Duke, Grand Wizard or Supreme Witch, I can't ever remember what his thing was. David Duke endorsed Donald Trump. And then now Louis Farrakhan endorses Donald Trump. Normally, David Duke and Louis Farrakhan would hate each other. They're both behind Trump. It's very compelling.
Yes, I guess Farrakhan might not know that Donald Trump has Jewish family members.
Right.
But it's interesting that he can put aside Donald Trump's, at least the appearance of Donald Trump's Muslim xenophobia.
Right.
Because he believes Trump is not beholden to Jews.
Remember that Donald Trump did actually speak to a room of Republican Jews and said, you won't support me because I don't want your money. So the comment is not completely out of left field in a sense, but what we can take away from this is that Donald Trump is truly a uniter, right? I mean, all of a sudden you have KKK leaders, former KKK leaders, and Nation of Islam leaders saying, Trump is the guy. This is a type of uniting that certainly we haven't seen in a very long time, have we?
But what happens when you put all of these new supporters in the same Donald Trump party,
yeah,
viewing party, what happens then? Do they hold hands?
I know what you're saying. Louis Farrakhan, David Duke, and Chris Christie all saying this is the best candidate. It's stunning and shocking to all, no question about it. I want to remind you that as Ted Cruz stays very close to Donald Trump in the delegate count, Donald Trump 25% of the way to the nomination, Ted Cruz 17% of the way to the nomination, corporate media continues to ignore that Ted Cruz was completely embraced by and embracing of that Kill the Gays pastor. Remember that guy I told you about, the Christian pastor who has advocated for the killing of all gay people? We've covered the story. My friend Michelangelo Signorile on Sirius Radio and Huffington Post has covered it. And I need to remind you that corporate media is complicit in not reminding people that one of the top 3 Republican presidential candidates embraced Pastor Kevin Swanson, who advocates putting to death all gay people. Pastor Kevin Swanson has said many times that Christians should attend gay weddings, but to hold up signs telling the newly married couple that they should be put to death. He was an advocate of that Ugandan Kill the Gays bill that we've talked about. He saw it as a model for the United States. And in late 2015, he did an event called the National Religious Liberties Conference, where Ted Cruz showed up. Kevin Swanson introduced Ted Cruz along with some other then Republican candidates. And Ted Cruz's own father has been a star speaker at these events. Take a look at a little bit of video from one of these incredible happenings.
Yes, Leviticus 20:13 calls for the death penalty for homosexuals.
Right.
Yes. Romans chapter 1 verse 32, the Apostle Paul does say that homosexuals are worthy of death. His words, not mine. And I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I am not ashamed.
What's dinner like with that guy, Louis? I mean, what happens if you have dinner with this dude? I'm sure at Chick-fil-A or something like that, right?
Yeah, he probably just rants about gays.
Get Ted Cruz on the record about this. I mean, if people are all over Donald Trump to disavow David Duke, a guy that, as far as we know, he's had no contact with for at minimum decades, if not longer, if ever, although he certainly knows who David Duke is. There's no not believing that. If we're so adamant about Donald Trump denouncing David Duke, what about this guy who wants to kill all gay people, who introduced Ted Cruz at an event, and Ted Cruz agreed to appear at this event? I encourage you to go to tedcruz.org/contact and ask Ted Cruz to make a statement about Swanson, or call his campaign offices, 713-353-4330, or tweet at Ted Cruz. Include me in that. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pacman Show. Let's get a statement from Cruz, the second place guy, Louis, about the pastor who introduced him, who wants to kill all gay people.
Not going to happen. Dream on, but good luck to you on that.
And your mic is definitely on that time.
My mic is on. You were throwing me off there by pointing at your ear.
No.
That's a good trick you've learned.
I like that the mic is on. That's it's better for the show, I feel like.
In a way.
When the microphones are on, yeah. Let's go to your voicemail. We have a voicemail number. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. I've talked about my Instagram exploits. I'm now on Instagram, Louis, and Louis is not huge on that, but viewers are up in arms demanding that Louis get on Instagram. Take a listen to this.
Hey, guys. First off, thank you for all you do. Super important, especially with what's all happening right now. I wanted to give a shout out to David. It's great to see him on Instagram finally. And just to kind of push Louis in the right direction.
Yeah.
As much as half of your adult audience is spending their online time on social media platforms, and those two, the top media platforms being Facebook and Instagram, a ton of your fans and a ton of your audience, including myself, would love to see you on there. Please join it. Take pictures of the show. Take pictures of your concerts that you go to. I don't care. It would be awesome to connect with you. Thanks, guys. Keep up all the great work.
Louis, I mean, if you had an Instagram feed, what would it be like?
I suppose it would be pretty dull, to be honest, unless you want to see pictures of me sitting playing computer games in my apartment. I'm not sure what I could really add.
Listen, you go yesterday by the way, this is a funny story. probably deserves its own segment, but in the middle of going from polling place to the Bernie watch party, Louis had to take a break to go shopping at a Middle Eastern market to start buying rose water, orange blossom water, and dried lemons. I mean, that's fascinating, Louis. If you posted, while I'm posting stuff from the election stuff, at the same time, people know we're working on this project together. Louis is buying dried lemons and asking whether they have, what was it that you wanted, the sour dried cherries, but they didn't have them. They only had the cranberries. That wasn't suitable for Louis. I mean, this is fascinating stuff to people.
I think that's subjective. And while you might find this really thought-provoking, others might not. But I suppose I could... it's hard to argue. I probably should be on there.
Yeah,
but it's a miracle I'm on Twitter at all. I mean, I'm on Twitter now. Okay, I'm not. No one's thanking me for that.
A lot of people thank me for you being on Twitter. I think your thoughts on cardamom could go along with some very, very interesting pictures and you could set Instagram on fire.
My thoughts on cardamom are put it on everything. Right. Yeah.
So anyway, people wanting Louis to get on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at david.pacman. Check it out. On the bonus show today, Making a Murderer Season 2 is coming. We will talk about the Massachusetts suicide encouragement case. We've talked about this a bunch of times. There's news there. And Louis, very, very excited. He almost couldn't focus on today's show because a new Star Trek series is on the horizon. We will get his thoughts about that. And, people I know want to hear that. Okay, that's it for today. Sign up at davidpacman.com/membership. Get instant access to the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.